Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited. We're going to begin today with a prayer by our campus pastor, Reverend Randy Duncan.
Thanks. Let's pray together. Lord, we're thankful that you are a good Father who provides for us. Thank you for the food, providing for us physically. We pray it would nourish our bodies so that we can be yours in this world to shine your love, your light in a world that desperately needs it. But also for the socially and relationally that you provide. Thank you for this opportunity to grow intellectually and to have iron sharpen iron, so that through this whole time together, this soup with substance, that the substance would nourish us in every sense of the term, mind, body, and spirit. We pray for Weldon and for this time that we have together, that it be used to better our world and further your kingdom. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It is my hope and my belief that this will be one of the most transformational 90 minutes of your life. So I am privileged today to introduce you to our guest speaker for the Soup with Substance series. And I have his bio here. And Weldon, I was thinking about this morning. I thought I could read you his bio, and I could tell you that he is a successful 7-8-figure entrepreneur, that he's been featured in Inc. magazine's one of the fastest growing American companies, sales expert, business guru. And all of that is incredible and amazing, especially when you hear his story. And yet none of it touches on the most important reason why he's here. And that's because of the human being that Weldon is. When I talked to Weldon and I told him about our university, about our students, about our faculty, he was so excited to come here and waived, 5-6-figure speaking fee so he could be here, because mission is more important than money and service is more important than self. So Weldon is one of my mentors. I developed our entrepreneurship program with mindset and mindset strategies because of Weldon Long's book, The Power of Consistency. He inspires me in my life, and it is my hope that he will inspire you. So before we begin, we're going to start with a brief video so you can get a glimpse of what you will hear today.
Having authored 15 books and trained over 4 million people in the field of communication and sales, I can honestly say that adopting and accepting the prosperity mindset was critical to help me achieve my goals. And I think Weldon Wally's story about handling adversity, overcoming challenges, and coming out to where he has today is such a vivid, true example of this concept. If you look at Weldon's life, that's exactly what he's done. I just feel honored to share the stage with him, and not only do I consider him a very good friend, but I consider him someone that is going to have a life-changing effect on many people in this world, especially those that will take what he says seriously and apply it to their life.
Are you ready? Are you ready to rock your life? You gotta dream big. Whatever you think you got as big as you can get, go bigger. And when somebody tells you you can't do it, don't let them get in your way while you're busy doing it. Success and wealth and prosperity. It's easy. It's just a little bit easier not to.
It is an honor and a privilege to introduce you today to our guest speaker, Mr. Weldon Long.
Thank you, Susie.
Weldon.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody, how you guys doing? I got to tell you, I don't even know where to start. I'm a little overwhelmed. I thought we waived half my fee. I didn't realize we waived the whole thing, so I'm a little distracted right now. I'm really. So Susie called me, I think about 6 months ago. It was, I remember it was a nice day. I live in Colorado, and it was a beautiful day. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I'm always checking email. I'm always working. I'm always, trying to get things done. I'm always very responsive to any inquiries that come into my website or social media platforms, that type of thing. And a Sunday afternoon, my wife and I were sitting outside. It was a beautiful day, so it must have been late summer, early fall. And my wife builds these beautiful swings, and we're just sitting on some trees, and we're just shooting the breeze. And I check a message, and it's from Susie. And she basically says, hey, I loved your book. And I don't know exactly what the initial inquiry was, but something about the book, and maybe we could buy some extra books or something like that. And I responded right away. And next thing I knew, the next day or a day later, we were on the phone chit-chatting. And she tells me about this program and the work that you kids, basically, compared to old people, kids, you don't feel like kids, but you young people, what you guys are doing. And I said, Susie, I would love to learn more. So we got to talking and chit-chatting. We did a video series, and she introduced me to Dan. I did his radio show with him. And I said, I'd love to just come out and see what you guys are doing. And she said, well, as long as you're here, would you mind working for free? I said, and I'll go do it. And then she tells me, she says, listen, we're building this mindset and entrepreneurial program, and I need the best mindset guy in the country to come in and talk to these students. And he's not available. We were wondering if you could come in and actually, so that's how I got the gig. I want to talk to you about some real simple ideas today. These are a couple of the books that I've written. I've written another book we'll talk about, which Susie and her team were kind enough to order several hundred copies, it looks like. So we'll be signing these and making them available to you a little later on. But this is what I normally talk about with people, mindset and sales. I teach people how to make money. So this message for me is a little bit different because, you're just preparing yourself to go out there and take over the world and build your empires and build your lives and things. So it's a little different message for me. But I think it's really so important because if I had learned at your age when I was in my late teens or my early 20s, if I had learned some of the lessons that took me many, many decades to learn, it would have not only saved me a lot of heartbreak, a lot of struggle, a lot of difficulty, it would have meant a lot of success much sooner in my life. So I think it's important we take some time and talk about, what many people refer to as kind of the soft skill. Whether you're studying business or accounting or whatever you're doing here, those are the hard skills, right? Those are the things you have to learn how to do to be an expert in your profession. And sometimes people look at the mindset as kind of a soft skill, kind of the warm and fuzzy part of education, the warm and fuzzy part of business. And what I want to convey to you today, it's actually the central most important thing to success is the mindset. Yes, you have to study accounting, business, literature, whatever you're doing. But without the right mindset, all the education in the world will be a resource you have that you don't use to its potential. Success is about leveraging your resources, leveraging your God-given talent, leveraging your skills, leveraging what makes you special, what makes you you. Because we all have this innate talent, this skill, this power within, but sometimes it can languish. I read one time a quote that far too many of us go to our grave with our music still inside of us. And that's a real waste. And, everybody has this talent. And we got to make sure that that talent shines, that your skills shine, that you leverage those things to build wealth and prosperity and happiness in your life. But here's the thing that's really important to understand, is that you're going to face adversity in your life. And one of the challenges of working with a very young group, while I'm sure there are many of you who have already experienced some difficulties in life, as you get older, life can be difficult. And we face challenges. People get divorced. People go bankrupt. People get sick and die. Bad things happen to good people. And so when I'm working with business groups and people my age, they've dealt with some struggle. When you haven't dealt with the struggle yet, it can seem a little remote, a little detached from you, like, what's he talking about adversity? Life's been pretty good to me, right? But here's the reality. The first 3 words of one of my favorite books of all time, written by M. Scott Peck, it's called The Road Less Traveled. The first 3 words of that book are, life is difficult. And even though you're young, I'm sure many of you have had difficulties, maybe in high school or grade school. Maybe you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend. Maybe you failed a test. Maybe there was some tragedy in your family. Maybe somebody got divorced or got sick. So I'm sure you've all been touched by difficulty. And here's one of the single most important lessons that if I had learned 20 years earlier than I did, it would have made every difference in my life. And here's that simple lesson. Difficulty, challenges are coming. Every man and every woman in this room will face the same 3 challenges in your life without question, without exception. And those 3 problems are relationship problems, health problems, and financial problems. Everybody deals with them at some point in their life. People get divorced, people get sick, people go broke. These things happen. And either you personally or someone very close to you is going to have difficulties in their life. It's going to touch your life. Maybe your folks got fired from their job. Maybe your family home went into foreclosure. Things happen. The question is not whether or not the problems are coming. The question is, how am I going to thrive in the face of these adversities that are absolutely guaranteed to affect all of us at some point in our lives? It's not a matter of I'll be successful when this happens, when that happens, because these challenges will always be there. The question is, how can I thrive in the face of difficulty? If you look at the most successful people on the planet, the most successful people in commerce and entertainment and business, they didn't magically avoid all the challenges in life. They didn't become Bill Gates because they never had a relationship or a health problem. They became Bill Gates because they learned how to thrive in the face of those challenges, to prosper in the face of any adversity. And when you have that mindset, when you have the mindset that can prosper in the face of any challenge, you have the keys to the kingdom. Because then nothing will hold you back. Nothing will deter you from your primary mission in life, whatever that is. You see, the reality is sometimes it's very easy to get in kind of a mindset that the external events around you, the economy, your family, whatever it might be, other people around you are impacting your ability to be successful. And that's just not true. It's always an inside job. Your external factors can sometimes make it more difficult. In other words, if you came from a very wealthy family and went to a very good high school, it's probably going to be a little easier for you to make your way through college. You might have come from the inner city and had a family that was very poor and went to a very bad school. Does that mean you can't be successful in college? No, it just means it's going to be a little bit harder. But nobody ever said it was fair. The question is, am I willing to do the work to become successful regardless of the external factors around me? Because success is an inside job. You will face challenges. Some will face more difficult challenges than others, but we all face them. The question is not whether or not your challenge is worse than my challenge or his challenge is worse than her challenge. The question is, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to thrive in the face of this adversity? And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you prosper in the face of any challenge? Whatever difficulties come in your life, health problems, relationship problems, money problems, how do you thrive in the face of those things? You got to get your mind right. You got to have the right mindset, what I refer to in my book, The Power of Consistency, as the prosperity mindset. Again, a mindset that is programmed and built to thrive in the face of challenges. Bring it. One of my favorite quotes, I've reposted it many times on my social media. It's one of my favorites. And the quote says, "The devil whispered in my ear, 'You can't handle the storm.' And I whispered back, 'I am the storm.'" You see, and that's the mindset you got to have in life. You are the storm. You're not at the mercy of other things, other factors in life. You are the storm. You create your own opportunities. You manifest your own prosperity. And the key to that is the right mindset. When I got the right mindset, everything in my life changed. Let me share a little story with you. In 2004, I opened a little company in my living room. By 2009, that little company was selected by Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing small companies in America. In that same year, in 2009, I wrote my first book, which again, you guys are going to get a copy of today, called The Upside of Fear. Now, when the book came out, it really changed my life. At the time I wrote the book, I didn't consider myself a writer. I was an entrepreneur, I was a businessman. And I made my money growing businesses and had some success at that, and that's what I did. But people kept telling me, "Dude, you should write a story about your life," because I've had a crazy life. And so in 2008, I sat down, I took 6 weeks off, and I went to Maui, and I wrote every single day 2,000 words. And I came back from that trip with the manuscript of my first book. When the book came out, it completely changed the direction of my professional work. The book won a number of awards, got a lot of recognition, and suddenly people started calling me to come speak to groups and companies and organizations to help them overcome adversities in their life. Now, the reason that my life story is a subject matter of this book is not because of the business success. It's because just 18 months before I started my company, which would take us back to January of 2003, in January of 2003, I was 39 years old and I was broke and homeless. And when I tell you I was broke and homeless, it's not a metaphor or an exaggeration. I was literally living in a homeless shelter in Colorado Springs, Colorado, at 39 years old. And if you follow that arrow down there right there, that's the little room I used to live in. And if you walk back to that room, hard to believe just 16, 17 years ago, you'd walk into the room and you'd see something that looks like this. Now, that is not actually a picture of me, but the reason I chose that picture is because the room that gentleman's standing in looks just like the room I was living in 17 years ago, January of 2003. I had so completely destroyed my life that this was the best I could do. I lost my son. I lost everything I ever had, family. I had no home, obviously. I had no car. I had 2 sets of clothing and $200 to my name that a friend had sent me. And that's where I started rebuilding my life 17 years ago. Now, while I didn't have anything in a material way, I didn't have money and cars and clothing and those types of things, I had the one thing that changed everything. I had the prosperity mindset. I had, just before this time, stumbled into some principles that so completely changed my life that despite the fact I started with nothing, I knew I was going to build amazing things in my life. Now, before I get into exactly how that mindset works, I want to tell you the rest of the story. You see, you might be asking yourself, how does a knucklehead end up in a homeless shelter at 39 years old? Well, for me, it was actually pretty easy. I was in that shelter because I had just completed serving 13 years in federal and state penitentiaries. In the years 1987, when I was about your age, until 2003, over that 16-year span, I spent 13 years walking prison yards. I went to the penitentiary the first time I was 23 years old. I was spun out on cocaine one night on the east side of Denver, Colorado, and picked up a guy hitchhiking. He and I decided to pull guns on a couple of guys. A couple of months later, I was sitting in front of a judge, and he sentenced me to state penitentiary for 10 years. I went down to the penitentiary at 23 years old. I was a 9th grade high school dropout. I'd never had a real job. I didn't have any education, any skill. And I was a garden variety loser. So at 23 years old, I was on my way to the penitentiary. I got down to the penitentiary, and I did about 4.5 years, and they paroled me. Now, when I got out of the joint the first time, I was 27, and I thought my life was over. At 27 years old, I thought it was done. I was still a 9th grade high school dropout, no skills, no education. Now I was a convicted felon on top of that. Not many opportunities. So I fell in with some guys I met in the joint, and about 18 months later, I was on my way back to prison for gun charges and parole violations. They sent me back for about 2 years. I got out again at 30 years old. My life was racing by me, 10 years at a time, and I had completely lost control of it. Now I'm 30 years old. I'm out of the joint a second time. Now I'm a 2-time convicted felon, and I see no opportunity for myself. My life is over. I become a felon. I have no education. So I got the only job I could find, which was working in a shady telemarketing operation, selling a bunch of worthless crap to people. And I did that for about 18 months until one day the FBI showed up, and we were all escorted away, and I was indicted on federal money laundering and mail fraud charges. I pled guilty to those charges and received 7 years in the federal penitentiary. I went to the federal penitentiary for 7 years, and at the end of that 7 years, at 39 years old, I walked out to that shelter, and my life completely changed within a few short years. And the question is, how? How did it happen? What happened? And why should you give a damn? Why should you give a rip that I spent 13 years in places like that? And today my life looks like this. And if you think that's cool, this is what it's really all about. Why should you care that my life looks like this today? Here's why I hope you care. Here's why I hope it matters to you. If I can do my job in the remaining time we have here, about 65, 70 minutes, if I can do my job well, and I promise you, I do my job well. If I do it in such a way that I can convey to you what happened, exactly what you can do to implement the exact same principles into your life, what do you suppose the impact would be in your young life? Your already successful life. You're getting a great education. You're not in a homeless shelter, although I'm sure the dorms may feel like it sometimes. Only kidding, administration. You know, you're not getting out of the penitentiary tomorrow. You got a life that's going on. You're making progress. You did some great things to get here. You're doing some great things here. The reality is, if you can apply these principles, if I can do my job and give them to you, and that's my responsibility to make sure I do it in such a way that it's easy to understand and even easier to implement. If I can do my job, and I take my job very seriously, and I can provide these principles to you in a way you can implement in your life, what do you think the impact would be? It would be an explosive level of success in your life. You will understand that anything you set your mind to, any amount of money, any kind of business, any kind of relationship, anything you want to build, create, anything you want to do, it's within your grasp. If you understand one simple principle, if it is to be, it's up to me. If you never blame external factors, if you never look to the why me, instead you look at it as why not me and what can I do about it? If you take a sense of personal responsibility that you create your life is not an accident. As you will see in our discussion, your life is simply the accumulation of every decision you've made up until today, for better or for worse. The reality is, you will understand that you can create whatever you want to create. Go wherever you want to go. Now, for some of us, this may be a little bit hard to comprehend because maybe we were told you'll never amount to nothing. Who do you think you are? You may have been told things that have very subtly held you back in life. We call them limiting beliefs. I call them junk in the trunk. Not that kind of junk, boys, but just junk up here. Limiting beliefs. We're going to talk about those and how they can impact your life. And if you're not careful, they can control your life and you won't even know. It happens so subtly. It happens so incrementally that it can take over your life and you're not even aware that you believe something that's not true. And yet, despite the fact it's not true, it's governing your life. It may seem a little crazy, but here in a few minutes, I promise you, you'll understand. So let's talk about how things changed for me, where they started changing. It all started on June 10th of 1996. On June 10th of 1996, I was in federal prison. I was just starting that 7-year federal prison term. I was 32 years old and had pretty much written myself off back in prison the third time. And on June 10th of 1996, a cop walks into the cell house. He walks over to me and he said, "Long, you need to call home. Your father's dead." And just like that, my entire life changed. My father died very unexpectedly at just 59 years old. And the moment that I heard the news that my father was dead, the next thought I had was, Dad went to his grave with me in prison again. My father's last earthly memory of me was me screwing up again. It was a devastating reality. I always had thought that somehow I'm going to get my act together and build a successful life, a life my father could have been proud of. And then on June 10th of 1996, I realized I waited too long. That chance had passed. That ship had sailed. So I started thinking a lot about my dad, and I started thinking back to a conversation I had with him once. And it was a Sunday afternoon. I was in prison, and I called my dad. My dad always took my collect calls. He was not a wealthy man, but he was always trying to help me and encourage me. And so he took my collect call on the Sunday afternoon. We're shooting the breeze, and I'm complaining about my life. I'm complaining about the judges, the snitch, and the ex-wife. I'm complaining about the prosecutors and complaining about the prison guards and everything in the world around me I'm complaining about. And my mindset was that if these people would just stop harassing me, I'd be okay. Like somehow my situation was their fault. And I'm having this conversation with my dad, and there's a point in the conversation where he just had enough of it. He had enough of the whining and the complaining and the blaming. And my father, he says to me, he said, "Son, your life could be worse than it is." I said, "Dad, what are you talking about? How could my life be any worse?" I'm 32 years old. I'm a 9th grade high school dropout, a 3-time convicted felon. I've never had a job or a home as an adult. And just to make things more interesting, I had a 3-year-old son that I fathered out on parole that I had abandoned. I said, Dad, I'm not even a father to my own son. How the hell could my life be any worse? And my dad says to me the words that changed my life. He said, son, you're still breathing. And as long as you're breathing, you've got a shot to change your life, but it's up to you to do it. Now, when he said those words, in the mindset I was in at the time, I didn't really get it. So I'm like, thanks, Dad, but more of a thanks for nothing, Dad. And we exchanged our I love yous, and I hung up the phone, and I never talked to my father again. 2 weeks later, he was dead, out of the blue. The last thing my father ever said to me is, at least you're breathing, and as long as you're breathing, you've got a shot. 2 weeks later, when he was gone, I started thinking about those words, and I was overcome with regret and grief and sadness of what I had done to my father, my family, my son, what I had done to myself. And you've heard the old expression, there's no atheist in a foxhole in war. Well, I don't believe there's any atheist in prison when you receive the news that your father died and your life is a total disaster. And so in that moment of clarity, that moment of realization that I was a total loser, that I had destroyed everything that I'd ever touched and hurt everyone who had the misfortune of coming in contact with me, I made a decision, a simple decision. I'm changing the course of my life today. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how much work is involved. I got nothing but time. I'm going to change it. And I made a decision that I was going to become the man that my father would have been proud of, and I was going to become the father this little boy deserved. And with that simple decision, I set out on a journey. Now, when I set out on that journey, I'll tell you, I didn't know where to start. As I said, I was a 9th grade high school dropout. Hadn't ever read many of them books and things. Was too busy pulling guns and doing drugs and raising Cain. So where do you start? Where do you start turning the Titanic of that life around? Well, I got the bright idea, I got the genius idea to start reading what successful people did in life and start doing that instead of what I'd been doing. And that was my master plan. So I went down to a little broom closet in the cell house, and in that broom closet was a cardboard box. There was a mop sink right there, a mop bucket, a bunch of chemicals we used to clean the cell house, and this cardboard box that was full of books. And I'd never been much of a reader up to that point. And the cops would come in and just throw books in that box, and that was kind of our library in the cell house. So I started going to that box trying to find something, anything that might give me some direction, just a hint, right? A clue as to what I needed to do next. And I stumbled into a little book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm like, I could use some habits of highly effective people. And I took that book back to my cell, and I started reading it. And I couldn't put it down. I read it, and then I reread it over the next several days and weeks. And eventually, as I began to consume the book began to consume me. And out of that book, and several others I read around that time, I stumbled into a roadmap for success. A roadmap that everyone who has ever followed it wins. There's no one else who's ever practiced these principles that didn't win. Dr. Covey in that book talks about you have the ability to live out of your imagination rather than your past. And at that point in my life, my past was drugs and violence and prison and poverty. And so that wasn't very promising. If that was a clue of what was to come, that wasn't very exciting. But when I could live out of my imagination, I could imagine amazing things. I could imagine love and wealth and prosperity. I could imagine these things. And then Dr. Covey talked about if you want those things, if you want the things you imagine, if you want the things you dream about to become a reality, because there's a big gap between wanting something and dreaming about something and getting it. There's a big bridge right there, a big, like Grand Canyon. You got to bridge that gap. And that gap from wanting something to having something are success principles. Principles of love, faith, fidelity, honor, thrift, generosity. The principles that are timeless. And Dr. Covey in that book, The 7 Habits, said these principles exist. And you cannot, he referred to them as lighthouse principles, right? I mean, the oceans can beat on the lighthouse. The lighthouse isn't moving. And he said in that book that you cannot break the principles of success. You can only break yourself against them. Moses said something very similar. So the reality is, I realized I have not been compromising the principles of honor and honesty and fidelity and faith. I've shattered myself against them. The principles were still there. They were better than ever. I had shattered myself by violating those simple principles. And when I got in alignment with those principles, everything in my life changed. You cannot outsmart the success principles. And you won't reinvent new ones. The principles that you're learning, getting this comprehensive education that you're getting, heart, mind, and soul, this education you're getting, the principles you will learn within that, they will guide you the rest of your life. You'll never outsmart them. You'll never outgrow them. The only question is, will you align with them or not? And if you don't align with them, I'm telling you, you may be experiencing some short-term success outside of these principles, but I'm telling you, something's going to smack you down hard eventually. At the end of the day, there's only one way to be successful. And the key to that success is the right mindset. It's not just what you're doing, it's what you're thinking. Let's talk about some of the lessons that I've learned in terms of getting the mind right. Imagine your life is a thermometer, a big, giant thermometer. And in the middle of that thermometer is 72 degrees. And 72 degrees is your comfort zone in life. We call it homeostasis. It's your comfort zone. It's everything that makes you unique, and it's everything that makes you happy. It's your dog. It's the foods you like. It's the friends you have. It's just everything that makes you you. It's the way you dress. It's the way you talk. It's just everything that makes you unique and wonderful. And so this comfort zone right there is 72 degrees. Sometimes in life, inevitably in life, something will come along and it's going to knock you out of your comfort zone, right? People lose their job. They lose their home. They get divorced. They get sick. Things come along and knock us out of our comfort zone. So here's one of the amazing parts about human nature. When life comes along and knocks you from 72 degrees down to 68 degrees, you don't just sit there and wallow in it. You fix it. You get a new girlfriend. You get a new dog. You get a new job. You get whatever. You change it and get back to your comfort zone because that's your comfort zone. That's a great characteristic of human nature. But here's the crazy part. Sometimes things in life come along that will improve your temperature. You go from 72 to 76. Better opportunities, better education. All these things come along that can make your life better. Here's the crazy part. 76 degrees feels just as uncomfortable as 68. Even though it's better, it's uncomfortable because you're used to 72 degrees. So what do people do when they have success and they get a better temperature? In many cases, they self-destruct. They do something to sabotage their own success. And they get back to 72 degrees because, hey, that's where I'm comfortable. So the number one lesson I want you to take away today, the first lesson, is that if you want success, you are going to have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You're going to have to do things that knock you out of your comfort zone that in many cases just don't feel natural because they're new. And here's where it gets crazy. Sometimes you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with these new things, and you have to deal with other people's discomfort about you getting better. One of the mind-boggling experiences I've had in my life is that as you start achieving unprecedented levels of success, new incomes, new businesses, new opportunities, new education, you can't expect everyone out there to throw you a garden party and roll out the red carpet. Because when your temperature goes to 76, guess what? You got a lot of people around you still at 72. And your success just doesn't make you uncomfortable, it makes them uncomfortable. Why? Because they ought to be doing it too. But they don't. Because they don't have your drive. They don't have your motivation. They don't have your determination. And so you move on. And all of a sudden they get uncomfortable. When I was a kid growing up in South Louisiana, we used to go crabbing. And you get these crab traps, or just collapsible, little metal cages, and you drop them off of a bridge tied to a rope. And you put a chicken neck or something in there, and those crabs will come crawling to it. And they walk right in that net, and then you slowly just pull the net right up. It collapses around them. You pull it right up, and you got boiled crabs that night, right? Now, as you're pulling that crab trap out of the water, most of the crabs just sit there. They're coming out of the water, they're flying through the air, they're minutes away from the boiling pot, and they don't even know. Those crabs are stupid, right? But there's that one crab, inevitably, that wakes up and says, whoa, this isn't natural flying through the air above the water. Something's going on here. I got to get out of this cage. And they got claws. They can climb right out. And he starts climbing out. What do the rest of the crabs do? They don't even try to get out. What do? They pull him down because they're threatened by his success. You have to understand there is a baseline of expectation for you that you learned where you came from, your family, your community. Here's the thing. What if, just what if, you want to do something more? What if you want to achieve more and be more and accomplish more than what your baseline is? Sometimes the people at the baseline are uncomfortable with that. And they will very subtly, sometimes very directly, try to pull you down. In today's nomenclature, I suppose we call those haters. And as a young woman recently said, according to my 16-year-old daughter, haters gonna hate, right? So you have to understand, lesson number one, everything we talk about from this moment on, some of it will be new. Although if you spent much time around this young lady, it won't be new at all. You'll be like, here we go again. But some of it will seem uncomfortable. And I'm just telling you, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Imagine right here, I had a box at the front of the room. And in that box is everything I need to build a beautiful motorcycle. All the parts, all the components, everything's in there. The frame, the engine, the wheels, everything's in there. And piece by piece, component by component, I begin to remove the parts of the motorcycle. Pull the frame out, pull the wheels out, handlebars. And as I pull the parts out of the box, I begin to assemble the motorcycle. I put the wheels where the wheels go. I put the handlebars where the handlebar goes. And at some point, I look in the box is empty. I have successfully removed all the components and put them together and built this beautiful motorcycle. Now, when I step back to admire this beautiful thing that I have built, what are the odds that I realize that instead of building a motorcycle out of the motorcycle parts, I inadvertently baked a cake. You can't bake a cake out of motorcycle parts, can you? If it's a motorcycle in the box, what is it outside the box? It's a motorcycle. It's not a trick question. It's the same material thing. So here's the point. That box is a metaphor for your brain, for your mind. Just give me 1 second because I don't want to start coughing. Talk amongst yourselves. That box is a metaphor for your mind. And your life, at your age, 18, 22, 23, whatever you're, right in that group, right? Your life is already in here. Everything you're going to experience in the next 50 or 60 years is already in here. Your relationships, your health, your money, it's all in here. It's in here in the form of your decisions, your choices, and your expectations. And here's what happens. You go out and you start leading your life. You're going to graduate from this university, and you're going to go on and start building your life. Keep in mind, everywhere you go in life, your box is following behind you. And what's going to happen, about 1 million times a day, you're going to make decisions, choices. Choices about who you love. Choices about your money, how you make it, how much you make, how you save it. Choices about your health. Choices about everything in your life. And every time you make a choice, every time you make a decision, you reach in that box and you pull out one of the components of your life. And day by day, year by year, the decades pass. And one day you get to the end of the line, 50 years from now, 60 years from now, 70 years from now. And you're going to look in the box and the box is empty. And you're going to look back at your life, your wealth, your health, your relationships. And what you're going to find is that your life is a perfect reflection of whatever's in your box. Because if it's a motorcycle in the box, it's a motorcycle when you pull it out of the box. Which means you got to ask yourself an important question. What's in your box? What are your real expectations about money, about relationships? Think about this. Where did the contents of your box, your thoughts, your expectations, your ideas, where did they come from? When you came into this planet 20 years ago, you had no ideas about money, no expectations about relationships or business or money or anything, did you? You had a clean slate. And then you start going through life and people around you, typically society, the adults, sometimes friends, they start filling your box up with ideas. I mean, how often as a young child do you contemplate, here's what I should think about money. I'm 7 years old and I should seriously consider what I think about money. No, your ideas about money came from where? The grown-ups around you. They threw their ideas in your box. Sometimes, in fact, most often, not with their words, but with their actions. Right? What do they do with money? What is their perception of money? And that idea goes in and creates your belief system for money. You learn about marriage and relationships by watching the grown-ups in your life. People walk by your box, and without even realizing what they're doing, they throw stuff in there. You'll never amount to nothing. You're too tall, you're too short, you're too black, you're too white, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too this, you're too that. Why can't you be like your brother? All this crap goes in the box. And before you know it, you're an adult. Welcome to adulthood. Sometimes it sucks. And now you're going to leave this university and you're going to start building your life. And you're going to reach in that box 1,000 times a day to make decisions. What's in your box? Who put it in there? When you reach in that box today as an adult, you're not a child anymore. When you reach in that box as an adult, you got to make sure whatever is in that box is what you put in there by design, not what the rest of the world put in there by default. Because maybe, just maybe, you want something different than the people who put the ideas in your box. Let me give you a couple of examples. When I was growing up, my dad would always say, son, rich people are crooks. Rich people are crooks. When I was growing up, I honestly believed when I saw successful people, nice house, nice car, whatever, my first thought was, I wonder who they screwed. Because I adopted the belief system that rich people were crooks. Now, who do you suppose put rich people are crooks in my dad's box? His dad, my grandfather, who, by the way, was raised during the Great Depression. One thing you got to understand about money is that so much of our attitudes in this country about money are a reflection of the Great Depression. Why? Because we're all 2 or 3 generations removed from somebody who lived through it. And what did people learn in the Great Depression? Rich people are crooks. We had a name for them, right? Robber barons. The successful people in the early 1900s during the Great Depression were ostracized. They were considered to be bad people by the poor people like my family. Maybe the poor people like your family, I don't know. But we developed this belief system that rich people were crooks. My dad got it from his dad. My dad gave it to me. Now, I'm 56 years old now, and looking back on my life when I was your age, I can see why I didn't have a problem with stealing money to get money. Because, hey, rich people are crooks, right, Dad? It became a self-fulfilling prophecy in a very negative, destructive way. So you have to stop and think, what's in your box? Who put it in there? What's your real belief system about money and wealth and your ability to achieve it and to have it? Let me give another example. I was doing a workshop a couple of years ago, and it was couples. It was couples who were entrepreneurs. And I'm having lunch with a couple that was at this event where I was teaching, and I'm talking to the wife, and at one point in the conversation, the wife tells me, she says, yeah, my dad was like your dad. My dad hated rich people. And he didn't want me hanging out with the rich kids when I was growing up and just didn't like the rich kids. Then she wanted to tell me how her dad had died, how much she missed him and loved him, wanted to make him proud, etc. And then we started talking about her business. And they had been in business for 10 years. They were in their mid-30s. They opened their business in their early 20s, and they were dead broke. They couldn't rub 2 nickels together. Their business just could not make money. So I'm taking all this in, having the conversation, and later that afternoon we're back in session, and I had the group working on an activity that I do that they have to distill their business goal down to one sentence, right? Because I'm big on the focus. You got to get focused, hyper-focused on what you want to accomplish. And so I came around to them, and I said, have you guys worked on your business goal? She said, yes. I said, what is it? She said, our business goal, simplified, is that we are going to retire at 50. And so everything they wanted to accomplish in their business was kind of encapsulated in that one idea. We're going to retire at 50. I said, that's a great goal. You're 35 years old now. You start building your business the right way, right? You save a lot of money. You sell your business at 50, off to the races. She goes, yep, that's what we're going to do. I said, by the way, what do you have to be to retire at 50? She said, well, you got to be smart. I said, nope, I know a lot of rich idiots. She said, well, I guess you got to be lucky. I said, you get to make your own luck. What do you have to literally be financially to retire at 50? You got to be rich. She said, yeah, you got to be rich. I said, yeah, you got to be rich. You're going to be rich. And she turns to her husband, gets a smile on her face ear to ear, and she goes, honey, we're going to be rich. She turns to the group, we're going to be rich. She turns to me, we're going to be rich. And then I had to point out the obvious contradiction. I said, so now you're telling me you want to become the thing your father hated the most? A rich person? I thought you told me you wanted to make your father proud. Seems to me you've been making him proud, what with all your financial struggle and all. You see the conflict? Out here in the real world, she wants to become wealthy, and she's willing to do the work, and she was smart, and so was her husband. They're willing to make the sacrifice and do the work, but in her box was her dad's idea about money and wealth and prosperity. And in her case, like in my case, the voice that was holding us back was like a voice from the grave, because the person who put the idea in there was dead and gone. But like a hand from the grave, they're still holding us back. Rich people are crooks. Don't do it. So until you examine your core beliefs about money and what's really possible for you, what's really possible for you is 100 times bigger than what you think. You have to make sure that the ideas in your box about money and business and life are consistent with what you want today as an adult. And that might be different from what people around you wanted for you. You get to write your own script in this life. You get to be whatever you want to be. You get to do whatever you want to do. But sometimes we get those limiting beliefs. People tell us we can't do it. We're never going to make it. They tell us we won't amount to anything. And they put these ideas in our head, and sometimes they're reaching that box. I'm not saying, for example, my dad's responsible for my problems as an adult. But I'm saying sometimes you can put ideas in a kid's box, and they'll reach in and pull it right back out years later. Everybody in here knows that person who was told they'll never amount to nothing, they'll never be nothing, they're no good, and they proved that true. They're probably not here with you today. Probably somebody you knew from grade school or high school. They got so much negative stuff in their box, and they believed it. And it created their destiny, even though it was false. Here's something to think about. This is why everything in your box eventually comes out of your box. When you have a thought, any thought whatsoever, the thought is the content of your box. Your mind is full of your thoughts. They're unique to you. Your expectations, your belief system. It's in there and it's uniquely you. Anytime you have a thought, anytime anything in that box you pull out, here's what happens. Your brain, as you know, is just kind of an electromagnetic field. And when you have that thought, it sends an impulse across your brain into a part of your brain called the hypothalamus. When the hypothalamus receives the thought, it begins to secrete a chemical that triggers the emotion. Once you experience the emotion, you take some action, a reaction, and that produces your results. So the emotions, the actions are always a reflection of the thoughts. That's the good news. Here's the scary part. Your emotions and your actions are a reflection of your habitual thoughts, even if your habitual thoughts are wrong or inaccurate. In other words, you can believe something that's not true and produce very real emotions, very real actions, and very real results. Let me give you an example or two. Suppose you're walking out of the theater one night, you and a group of your friends, and you're walking across the parking lot, and from around the corner, a guy comes running at you. He's screaming, He's covered in blood. He's got a knife in his hand, and he's running at you and your friends like he intends to hurt somebody. Within a nanosecond, your brain starts thinking, danger, 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 right? Immediately, you know in a dangerous situation. Within another nanosecond, you've got epinephrine and adrenaline coursing through your body. And now you've got a heightened, frightened emotion, right? The thought triggers the emotion. Emotion didn't just happen. It came as a reflection of the thought. Once you get the emotion, what do you got to do? You got to take some action, fight or flee, right? Well, the guy's right up on you, don't have time to run. So in an effort to protect your friends, you jump out, you swing, you connect with the guy, you get him in the jaw, you drop him like a sack of potatoes. What's the result? You protected your friends. Just the way it's supposed to work, right? Had a thought, triggered the emotion, reaction, result. So far, so good. Until the police show up. When the police show up and the guy regains consciousness, you realize that your thought was wrong. You misunderstood and misinterpreted the whole situation. Turns out the guy was no threat to you whatsoever. The blood was fake. The knife was fake. He was a kid running across the parking lot to meet some friends for a Halloween party. You assaulted a perfectly innocent teenager. Congratulations. Now, even though your thought turned out to be wrong, how real were the emotions you felt? How real were your actions? How real is his broken jaw? You see, you can produce very real results in life out of false thoughts, out of misinformation. Because the thought, when it creates the emotion, there's nothing in your brain that says, hey, this is untrue, let's don't believe this. That's not the way it works. If you believe something, if you believe what somebody else told you, it will trigger how you feel, how you act, and what you create in your life, even if what they told you was total BS. That's why you have to stop and examine what's in the box. Where did it come from? Who the hell put it in there? Was it accurate? Is it consistent with what you want today as a grown man or a grown woman? When you woke up this morning, how quickly did you start thinking about your life? Like as soon as you open your eyes, right? You're thinking about breakfast or school or test or something, right? Thinking. We go through life all day thinking. Thinking about friends, thinking about work, thinking about school, thinking about this, thinking about family, thinking about that. All day long, thinking. How often do we ever stop to think about what we're thinking about before we think about it? Think about that. You got to think about what you're going to think about. Why? Because what you think about is going to trigger this entire cycle 1,000,000 times in your life. There was a very famous case about 12 years ago, 13 years ago in Ohio. Two young teenage girls left high school together, and they got in a traffic accident. So horrific was the accident that first responders couldn't tell which girl was which. They were best friends, they looked similar hair and clothing, and they were so badly injured they couldn't even tell which girl was which. They had two sets of IDs. Finally, they sort the whole mess out. To make things worse, one of the girls dies. Only one survives. So one girl goes off to the hospital. One girl goes off to the morgue. One family goes off to the hospital. Other family has to do the unthinkable and plan a funeral for their teenage daughter. About 5 weeks after the funeral, the young girl in the hospital regains consciousness and begins to speak. 5 weeks later. When she begins to speak, her family realizes this is not our daughter. They had mixed them up, which meant their daughter had been buried 5 weeks earlier. The other family got a call saying, your daughter's alive in the hospital. Can you even imagine? But here's the interesting question. During those 5 weeks, were the emotions and actions of each family based on what was true or what they thought was true? You see, that's how powerful a thought is. You can believe something that's not true, but if you believe it, you feel and act as if it's true. You have to make sure this is accurate. You have to make sure this is based on principles that have been around forever. You have to make sure it's not somebody else's idea. Because what if they were wrong? What if they just wanted something different? You've got this idea in your box. All these ideas. And every time you make a choice, you're going to bring out those ideas. Let's say you get out of here and you get your paycheck. And you got to make a decision. Am I going to spend this paycheck on a fun weekend in Vegas? Or am I going to save 10%? Well, let me reach in my box and find out. You reach in your box, and if you pull out, I'm going to save 10%, you just pulled out a piece of your financial well-being, didn't you? If you reach in that box and you pull out, woohoo, going to Vegas, you pull out a different financial reality, don't you? So 20 years from now, you can't look at your financial situation and say, how the hell did this happen? How did I end up like this? I can tell you how you ended up like that. It's simply a reflection of every decision you made about money and saving and prosperity in the previous 20 years. That's not an accident. It's just a reflection of every small decision, what I call seemingly inconsequential decisions. The seemingly inconsequential decisions are the ones you're pulling out every day without even thinking about it. I'll give you an example. How long have we known in this country smoking's bad for our health? About 100 years now. And a lot of people still smoke, as crazy as it may seem. A lot of people still smoke cigarettes. Now, why in the world would somebody smoke cigarettes knowing what we know about smoking and the health risks? The reason people smoke is very simple. Smoking won't kill you today. Whatever problem smoking might cause is 20, 40 years down the road. And human nature is such that it is, if it's not immediate, if there's no immediate consequence, we ignore it, right? It's not going to kill me today. But try this, for example. Take the most avid smoker that you know, and instead of giving him one seemingly inconsequential cigarette at a time, give him instead an entire year's worth of cigarettes at one time. 2,000 cigarettes, depending how many they smoke. Wrap 2,000 cigarettes up like a giant cigarette, take it to him and say, smoke them if you got them, pal. Would he smoke 2,000 cigarettes at one time? Of course not. And if you're asking why not, what would he say? It'll kill me. It'll make me sick. Absolutely. It'll kill you and make you sick. Smoking 2,000 cigarettes at one time. But guess what? Smoking 2,000 cigarettes, one seemingly inconsequential cigarette at a time, will kill you too. It just takes longer. This is the crazy part about human nature. When you have a big decision in your life, a 2,000 cigarette decision, you're going to make the right decision. It's a no-brainer. There's no way I'm smoking 2,000 cigarettes at one time. But it's crazy. You break those 2,000 cigarettes down to individual cigarettes, and the guy says yes to every single one of them. The human brain's insane. You got to learn to make the same decision when it's a small decision, when it's 10% of your income, as you will if it's $100,000 of your income. But you got to make sure that the right decisions are in that box. So let's talk about the time we have remaining. How do I get the right things in my box? If you agree with the basic premise that, okay, my habitual thoughts are probably creating my reality, and I promise you they are. They're creating all the results that you have in school, in your career, when you build your companies, your businesses, or if you go into a practice where you just build your profession. Your habitual thoughts will trigger what you feel, what you do the rest of your life. For all of us. The question is, how accurate are these? And are they consistent with what you want? Or are your thoughts what somebody else put in your box 10, 15, 20 years ago? Interesting question, isn't it? Let's talk about how we change it. The book you're going to get is called The Upside of Fear. And fear is an acronym that we're going to walk through real quick. Excuse me, that's the process for examining what's in your box. And if you don't like something in there, we got to change it. If we have some limiting belief or some restrictive belief in there, we can change it. So focus, emotional commitment, action, and responsibility. Let's talk about those real quick. First step is focused. Many of you may have read a book. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It was written in 1937 by a fellow named Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. And in the early 1900s, Napoleon Hill spent 20 years studying the most successful people in the world. And over the course of those 20 years, he met with about 500 leaders in the world, various businesses and politicians, Thomas Edison, really, really successful people. And in 1937, he published his findings and listed the 17 characteristics they all had in common. They all had 17 things in common. They didn't even know what they had in common, right? But he studied them, 17 principles, and he wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. The number one thing they all had in common was what he called a definite purpose. In other words, focus. They knew exactly what they were trying to pursue. Now, this is really important because sometimes you can go through life and say, well, I want to be successful or I want to be rich. You have to have definiteness in your purpose. You have to have focus. You need to be specific about what you're trying to accomplish in your life with your health, your wealth, and your relationships. You got to know exactly what you want. So what's the process for doing that? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to ask yourself, in those three areas, your health, your wealth, your relationships, what do you want to achieve specifically? So is it a certain amount of income? Maybe you want to earn $500,000 a year. Maybe you want to get married one day and have a family, and you want to be a 10 as a husband and a father, or a mother and a father, a mother and whatever it would be, mother and wife, I guess. That was kind of weird. I was in California last week, so anything goes. So get specific about what you want to accomplish in your life. Don't just like go out there and be like a rudderless ship at sea, right? Set your anchors. What do you stand for? What do you believe? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want in your box? What do you want to reach in and pull out every day? You see, you get to decide now. When you were at 7 or 8 years old, you didn't have the ability, when somebody told you something that wasn't true. Listen, when you're a kid and a grown-up says it, it's gospel. You don't have the deliberative experience and opportunities and abilities at 10 years old to say, Dad, I think that's actually false. Right? When Dad says it, it's true. But sometimes when you grow up, it's like, well, Dad, it's good for Dad. Dad was happy with mediocre. I want more. I want to build. I want to give. I want to grow. I want to change the world. Maybe you want to accomplish something more. Right? So you got to make sure that you're specific about what you want to create. And then what you have to do is you have to write it down. It's critically important. You have to figure out, what do I want? What do I need to do? Right? And you got to keep it simple. This is one of the things we do as adults. We overcomplicate things. And I will tell you that the confused mind says no. If you have a list with 50 to-dos on it, nothing happens. Get a list with 2 or 3 things to do on it, you'll get them done. You got to get focused on the most important things you got to do to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Right? So in other words, you figure out, here's an example. Let's say you want to make $500,000 a year, right? What do you need to do that? There's going to be a million things you have to do. But you got to focus on 2 or 3 that you can execute on every single day consistently. So I contribute overwhelming value in all I do. I finish what I start. Critically important. Critically important. Anybody thinking about dropping out of college? Better not. Okay, just checking. I succeed at everything I do. I have the belief system. I have the principles. If I contribute overwhelming value in everything I do, I always finish what I start. I succeed at everything I do. Likelihood is eventually I'm going to get here, right? The key is to focus on these 3 activities. Let me tell you something. I got 103 IQ. People say that can't be true. I've been to prison 3 times. When you go to prison, they give you a series of tests. One of those tests is an IQ test because they can't believe how stupid you are for coming back, right? But every time I took the test, I'm about 103. So my success is not a reflection of some brilliance. It's focus and execution. I am a bulldog on execution, right? I will stay with something until I meet it. I'm going to tell you something. My son, my little boy in that picture, he's 27 years old now. And he just graduated from the University of Colorado last year. Super proud of him. Took him 7 years to get through a 4-year program. That's my boy. I caution parents, and if I met your parents, I would caution them, if you're going to send your kid to University of Colorado with legal marijuana, you better be patient because it's going to take a long time. Bottom line is, when he was in high school, I remember him coming home one day, and he had some beef with some kid. He was upset about it. He was crying. And he didn't want to go back to school. Dad, you didn't finish high school, And I'm like, son, quitting school is not an option. I don't care if you pass with C's and D's. You're going to get the satisfaction of finishing. Because there is nothing quite as satisfying as finishing something. Like even washing your car, and you get every drop of water off it, you clean the wheels, and you sit back and like, dang, I finished. It's such a good feeling. Then when he got into college, several times, his mother passed away in his 3rd year of college. And he's like, Dad, I'm quitting school. I said, no, you're not quitting school. You take some time off, or you can stay. He decided he wanted to stay in. He failed every class for a year. But I said, you're going to stay in school. And he eventually had to work through his mother's death, and he got back on his feet, and he ended up graduating. And today he tells me, he says, Dad, I am so grateful for you forcing me to finish. I mean, he's a musician, so he's broken happy. He's studying music, right? I don't get it. But the bottom line is he has the satisfaction of finishing, right? He feels that sense of accomplishment, that self-respect that comes from finishing things. The number one thing you got to do in life is to finish whatever you start. Finish it. Don't walk away. Don't quit. Don't give up. So if you contribute overwhelming value, that's what I do in my life. People are shocked at the money I make. And I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm saying to impress upon you what's possible. The reason that I command the fees that I do is because the results that I produce. I add value everywhere I go. And if I evaluate a project, if I don't think I can add value, I won't take it. Why? Because my reputation's on the line. If I take a project and I can't change a company, that's going to hurt my reputation. You have to add value. You have to contribute something. You have to never quit, and you have to succeed at everything you do. And if you don't quit and you add value, you are succeeding. Right? Here's another example. I'm an inspirational leader. I make smart and thoughtful choices. I execute like a boss. I'm strong, confident, and impactful. So let's say these are two things you want to do accomplish. Right? You write down what you want, and then you write down the 2 or 3 things you have to do. The key is now we have to put this in the box. Why is that important? Because when you make a decision, I want you to reach in and pull out these choices. I want you to pull out what you put in your box, not something somebody else put in there 10 or 15 years ago. I want you to create the contents of your box, because the contents of your box will eventually be a reflection of your life. Every time you make a decision, you pull out a little piece of your life. You got to make sure you're pulling out what you put in there, not what somebody else wanted. Let me tell you something real quick. There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. It's a filter. It decides in life what you notice and what you don't notice, right? So let's say you're driving down the main street in your town and you just had lunch. You'll drive past every restaurant and not even notice the restaurants. But you drive down that same street when you're hungry and you'll notice every restaurant. That's the reticular activating system. It filters out things that don't matter to you and focuses on what does matter to you. It's always deciding what's important to you, and that's what you focus on. If something is not relevant to you, a piece of information, for example, your reticular activating system will filter it out. Like, oh, that doesn't impact me. And it's doing this all the time. It's helping you focus on what's important to you. Here's the challenge with it. Suppose in your box, you got the expectation you're going to make $50,000 or $100,000 a year. Nobody ever specifically told you that, but your dad made 50 to 100, and your neighbors made 50 to 100, and that's just who we are, right? My grandfather used to say, my grandma would make a big meal, he'd say, ooh, the po folks eating good tonight. We were the po folk. My grandfather defined us as poor people. That was the identity we took on, right? It took a long time for me to work through that, right? A long time to get into a prosperity mindset, right? So the reticular activating system is filtering out things that don't matter to you. What if in your box you have the expectation to make 50 grand a year, because that's what everybody in your neighborhood, everybody in your small town, all your friends, that's what their parents made. And then one day you're bebopping through life, doing your thing, and a $500,000 idea comes by. What do you think the reticular activating system will do with a $500,000 idea with a $50,000 expectation? It'll filter it out. This isn't relevant to me. I'm looking for ways to make 50 grand. And you'll filter out an amazing opportunity. All of a sudden, all the distractions are gone. What matters to me is right here. This inspires me. And then I think about my key priorities, my financial priorities, my health priorities, and my relationship priorities. First thing I read every day, I'm an awesome husband to Terry, right? That, of course, is my wife. I'm patient, understanding, and present with her. I remind her daily of my love, devotion, appreciation. I give her praise and recognition for all she does. Let me ask you something. Without even knowing my wife, I'll ask the women in the room. Even without knowing my wife, if a guy just did these 3 things with you every single day, he'd be a pretty dang good husband, wouldn't he? Right? Some love, some patience, some understanding, simple things. Guys, I will tell you, you're young men, and there's a number one thing a woman wants. She wants to be respected and cherished. That's it. If you respect her and cherish her, everything else will work out, right? And don't ever raise your voice, right? Simple things. What are simple things we can do? And ladies, I won't let you off the hook here. You're probably not old enough yet to know this because you haven't been family and home and kids on it. But there will come a time where your husband is going to go do something in the house. He's going to fix the car, fix the washing machine, fix the deck, whatever. And you will be 100% certain he's going to screw it up, right? But don't say it, right? Because men want to be the hero. Men want to be the hero. They want to be Superman. They want to fix things. They want to take care of things. Women want to be respected and cherished. Those 2 things, that's a whole other conversation. But those 2 things will go a long way towards a relationship. I'm an awesome father to Hunter. I support him in whatever he does. That's not always easy, by the way, right? Because he's a different character than me. He's not driven. He's not focused. He works as a ski instructor when the ski area is in Colorado. He likes to play his music and hang out with his girlfriend, his friends, and, it's like he's just not, but that's who he is. So I just got to deal with it, right? He's an honest person. My kid is the one at the festival with the free hug sign. That's my kid. Free hugs. I'm like, son, at least charge for the damn things, right? I communicate my love, pride, and belief in him. I don't pick or criticize with him. I make him feel capable. I'm an awesome father to Skylar. Skylar's my stepdaughter. She's 16 years old, and she makes me insane because raising a girl is very, very complicated these days, and she's got an attitude as big as all outdoors on her, but I love her to death. I give her my time and attention. I communicate my love, pride, and belief in her. By the way, Skylar was 8 when I married her mother, so I've just watched the changes. And she's a beautiful, beautiful girl, smart as a whip, but man, attitude galore. I weigh 200 pounds. I hold nutrition as a higher value than taste. I exercise 5 days per week. I'm in great physical condition. I have unlimited strength and endurance. My business operations run smoothly and effortlessly. We stay focused and complete our responsibilities. We function without conflict. We work hard, celebrate often, and always hit our goals. And these are financial things I want to accomplish. It's what I call a prosperity plan. Now, the key is once you got your plan for life, and by the way, I like to keep it simple, right? My whole life is on one sheet of paper. Every key priority of my life is on that sheet of paper. If it's not on that sheet of paper, it's not a priority, right? Golf is not on that sheet of paper. I love playing golf, and I enjoy playing golf, but it's not a priority. It's not on that sheet of paper, right? So if I ever got to choose between something and something on that sheet of paper, the sheet of paper wins, always. The key is now, I've got to get deeply emotionally connected to that list. You have to make the things on that list like another strand of your DNA, right? And to do that, you can do what I call a quiet time ritual. A quiet time ritual is a few minutes each day, 10 to 15 minutes a day, reading your prosperity plan. And as Napoleon Hill said, imagining yourself already in possession of these things. So you review your key priorities, the things you're going to accomplish, the things you've got to do to accomplish those things. You review those things and you allow yourself to get excited. You allow yourself to get connected to those things in a very emotional way. It's critically important. 10 to 15 minutes a day reviewing those. My very first prosperity plan, we were having dinner last night. And my very first prosperity plan, I was in prison and I wrote it out on a sheet of paper and I stuck it to the wall of my cell with toothpaste. And every single day I would get up and I would review that list. I was living out of my imagination, like Dr. Covey said. I would imagine what it would be like to have that life and have that person. And that starts changing the neural connectors in your brain. These become expectations. The key is getting deeply emotionally connected. Now, here's what else is really important. How are we on time?
We're good. And if any of you guys have class at 12:30, obviously you can feel away. If you want to skip the class and stay, I'm not going to stop you. Edit that for the tape.
Totally skip class.
And there's food in the back if you guys.
I'll wrap this up. I'll get quick. I want to touch on a couple of things. When you review that plan, again, you got to allow yourself to be deeply emotionally connected to it. And I want to give you an example. The first thing that was on my list was a commitment I made to my son to be an awesome father. And every single day I would review that list and I would imagine what it would be like to be that father. Years later, I got out of prison and I get my son and he goes off to college. When my son goes off to college, it was like, I'm sure it was for many of you, kind of an emotional experience for your parents. And I remember being in front of the dorm where my son was going to be living, and I put my arms around him, and I said, son, words cannot even describe how proud of you, how much I love you, how proud I am of the man you become. And my son turned to me, and he said, no, Dad, I'm proud of the man you finally became. And in the moment, my son was extraordinary, but the thing that was most remarkable about it, the way it felt in that moment, was the same way it felt 15 years earlier when I was pretending to get in prison alone, right? Because I was so emotionally connected to that thing happening that when I would pretend it, it felt the same way when it happened. And that's what I mean by getting deeply emotionally connected to your dreams. Last thing I want to share with you real quick, this is a picture of my son. I tell people he's the one in the back of the bike here. He's kind of a hippie. He goes through phases. He's a great kid. I got him when he was 10. He had a very difficult first 10 years of his life. I was in prison. His mother was a heroin addict. You can imagine what the kid went through. But he's bounced back and really built a great life for himself. Last thing real quick, action. I will just tell you this. Will Rogers once said that even if you're on the right path in life, you'll get run over if you just sit there. You have to take consistent action. That's execution, right? You have to execute. And then finally, responsibility, personal responsibility. Here's the reality. Everybody in life has problems. And then the problems come into your decision-making factory, which is your brain, your box, and then you have a result. Here's the bad news. The bad news is everybody has problems in life. The good news is your results in life are not a reflection of your problems. Your life is a reflection of your decisions that you make about your problems. Where do the decisions come from? They come from your box, which is why you need to know exactly what's in there. And you have to make sure every single day that what's in that box, what you're pulling out, is consistent with what you chose as an adult, not something somebody else put in there 10 or 15 years ago. Henry David Thoreau said, advance confidently in the direction of your dreams and endeavor to live the life that you have imagined, and you will meet with success unexpected in common hours. And I'll tell you guys, that's more than just a bunch of fancy words. It's a promise. Advance confidently in the direction of your dreams, endeavor to live the life that you have imagined, and you will meet with success unexpected in common hours. Thank you guys for your time and attention. I appreciate it. God bless you, and enjoy your time here in beautiful Concordia University. With that, we'll bring out Miss Susie. And
Thank you so much, Weldon. Wow. Can we stand up and give him a round of applause? Thank you, Weldon.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. Woo!
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And thank you to Career Engagement, to Lisa, to Joey Lynn, to Alicia, to Ashton, to Peter. Thank you, everybody, for putting on Soup with Substance. And thank you so much, Weldon.
Thank you.